All right, can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm the kind of person that, I like to bounce all around a room, which I can't do because there's a mic here, okay? So if you catch me doing that, just go like this and I'll grab this mic, all right? Well, it's really great to be here with you today. And I wanted to say that I don't know how many of you know Rodney well, but I have known him for, as he said, a long time. Hello. Have known him for a long, long time since, gosh, I mean, it has to be like 20 years or something. I can't imagine because I'm only 25, but, but basically, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you. I'm really honored, and if any of you ever get the chance, Rodney will take care of you unlike anything else, okay? He has literally been doing nice things for me since the moment I landed at the airport, and I just really, really appreciate you. And it's been such a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with everybody here. So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about developing and sustaining partnerships with HBCUs. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of HBCUs, short. I'm going to talk about some of the strengths, but what I really want to talk about is how you can develop partnerships and sustain them. And then I'm happy to answer any questions as well. And if anybody at some point wants to ask, because of the obvious question in the room, how did I end up being what some people would call an expert on HBCUs? I don't necessarily call myself that, but I've been doing research for about 25 years related to HBCUs, and I'm happy to answer that question. I've written lots of essays about it. It's been a long, long time, but it's a question I'm happy to answer. So, okay, so we'll get started. And I want to talk first a little bit about the history of HBCUs. Okay, I wrote down some sort of key points. By the way, all of these illustrations are done by an artist named Chloe Epstein, and she did them all special for a new project that I have. I have a book called HBCU, The Power of Historically Black Colleges and Universities. It just came out, and so she did all these illustrations. Okay, so sometimes people don't realize that we did have some HBCUs before the end of the Civil War, and those were in Pennsylvania and Ohio. So does anybody know which HBCUs those are? Wilberforce, Lincoln, Cheney, okay. And then we also have the University of the District of Columbia that pops up in there as well. There are lots of arguments about who's first, but to me, I don't think that really matters that much, so I'm not going to go there. So anyway, people are always arguing about it, and I'm like, okay, let's do something with all that energy. So you do see some of that, but you also see the majority of them popping up after the Civil War, so after 1865, and then they are really the product of a couple of different things. Abolitionists, right? Both white and black abolitionists are at the helm in terms of moving HBCUs to the forefront. They're also a product of segregation. I mean, quite frankly, something that we forget in this country is we did not allow African Americans to attend our colleges and universities. We did not allow them. Right? We also didn't allow a lot of other people, but we did not allow, and in fact, up until recently, there are some institutions that still had those policies on the books at their institutions. And so that's another reason why we get HBCUs. And then also, systemic racism, which is alive and well, and that's one of the reasons why we got HBCUs. HBCUs started in old schools, old army barracks, churches, anywhere that black people could find a place to learn, that's where you see an HBCU pop up. And I like to remind people that the majority of HBCUs started either with the government's Freedmen's Bureau, with the American Missionary Association, but a lot of them also started because African Americans came together and started their own schools. So the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church, started, all right, there we go. A proud alum of Morris Brown College over here, which is a AME church school. So anyway, that's kind of how they get started. When they first start out, a lot of them have white students because they are the children of the white faculty who happen to be teaching there. Keep in mind, we starved African Americans of any kind of formal education. Remember that I said formal, because African Americans are going to find a way or make one, and were teaching themselves to read, learning to read, trying to get any education they could because they realize that that is the way to get out of the situation you're in. So if you want to read an amazing book on that topic, Heather Williams, it's called Self-Taught. Beautiful, beautiful book by an African American woman scholar. Okay, so another thing that happens is that these institutions have an express purpose. Unlike most institutions, that they are going to educate African Americans. That's the mission. That doesn't mean that they don't educate other people, but there's an express purpose. The one thing about black colleges is that they have never discriminated against people of other races, ever. And in fact, they've been places where right now you have a growing Latinx population, you have a growing Asian American population, you have about 14% of the students are white. During different times in history, they've taken in people who have been discriminated against. During the McCarthy era in the 1950s, you saw them take in Jewish faculty and Jewish students who weren't allowed, they were kicked out of universities in the Northeast. So they have this incredible tradition of being a welcoming, family-oriented community, and we'll talk more about family. They're also places of civil rights activism. So as an example, I have the incredible honor of holding the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Endowed Chair, something that I am so, so honored to hold. Samuel DeWitt Proctor was the president of North Carolina A&T University and Virginia Union University, both historically black colleges. Here's an interesting thing. The kickoff of the student civil rights activism in the country took place at North Carolina A&T. Took place on February 1st, 1960. I was born on February 1st, 1968, and I am so proud to be born on that day. I remind people every year when they say happy birthday, I was born on the day that the civil rights movement kicked off on HBCU campuses. I feel like it's a little bit of my destiny, right? So, okay, another thing that I remind people of is HBCUs are responsible for the black middle class as we know it today. If we did not have HBCUs, keep in mind, the majority institutions were not allowing black people to go. Maybe one here, one there, but not overall. So HBCUs are completely responsible for what we see today in terms of our Vice President of the United States. Regardless of your politics, the Vice President of the United States is a Howard University graduate, right? Okay, so whatever your politics are, that's something to be proud of, okay? So if you look at judges and lawyers and doctors and veterinarians and pharmacists, you go across business people, you go across the gamut, you're gonna see HBCU grads. The two African American women CEOs in the Fortune 500, HBCU grads, okay? So just incredible contributions that you're gonna see. I like to tell people they have a disproportionately positive impact in the STEM fields. So if you did not have HBCUs, the percentages of black people, especially black women, but black people overall in the STEM fields starts to go down, 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 down. That tells you that majority institutions are not doing a good job. Because there are only 105 HBCUs and there are 5,000 institutions in this country, colleges and universities. So every time I hear that stat, I think to myself, the rest of us are not doing a good job. HBCUs are doing a great job, but the rest of us are not doing a good job. And then the other thing that's incredibly important is that HBCUs, and I just saw the new data on this, and they continue to excel, are really, really good at providing an undergraduate education that sends students to graduate and professional school in large numbers, okay? And there's something that they do that changes things, and that is that they build confidence that allows students to be able to navigate predominantly white environments, which are not always as friendly and supportive as they could be. All right, so now I'm going to tell you a few strengths that I think we all can learn from with regard to HBCUs. Okay, so they offer on a daily basis culturally relevant teaching. We all should do this. We should all want students to come into a classroom and see themselves in the readings that we assign, in the activities that we do, in the authors, right, that we talk about, in the guest speakers that we talk about, and we really want to get a sense of where students are coming from so we can build on their life experiences, rather than coming into a classroom and thinking, well, I just know everything, and I'm here to impart this amazing knowledge that I possess, right? I think one of the things that I've learned over time, and I've changed my teaching immensely since I've been to 103 of the 105 HBCUs over the years, many of them multiple times, but is learning to center students in the teaching process rather than myself. And in PhD programs, we're often taught, we don't learn much about teaching, but what we do learn is that make it easy on yourself, okay? And that's what I was taught. And so one of the things that I've unlearned over the years is, you know, I want to take care of myself, but I also want to make it the best learning environment possible for students. So that's something that I learned from HBCUs. They also have empowering environments and safe environments, but not environments that don't challenge you intellectually. A safe environment is not one that says, we don't want to push you to think. A safe environment is one where you feel comfortable asking questions, but you also feel comfortable being challenged, right? Because the only way that we learn is to be challenged and to challenge ourselves. One thing I love about HBCUs is, oh, what are we doing? Oh, okay, well, all right, here we go. One thing that I love about HBCUs is, by and large, they have a climate of collaboration over competition. Now, I did want to tell you all, I'm not just making this stuff up. I've been doing this research for a long time, and a lot of it is based on really large research projects that I've done all across the country with HBCUs and collaborating with HBCU researchers. So one of the things that I love is this idea that instead of looking at my classmate as someone who I am in competition with, I am thinking instead, I want, and I'm just going to look at you because I can see your beautiful face right here. So my success and your success are intertwined. Your success is my success is your success. And I remember the first time I heard a student say this was at Spelman, and she said, my job is to, oh, I knew, I saw it. I saw you walk in the room. Because, you know, a Spelman grad will make sure you know them. I literally saw you. I'm eating my rice, and I saw it. Okay, so she said, I need to reach back and pull a sister up. She said, that's my job. Once I make it, I reach back, I pull a sister up. So that is not what we typically learn. We typically are in very competitive environments. You know, I tell a little story. I once had a student who came up to me after class, and she said, Marybeth, I just want you to know that so-and-so isn't doing her reading. And I just wanted you to know because it's important to me that I get an A. And I said, you know what would be a wonderful thing? Why don't you go talk to so-and-so and see how you could support her in making sure she has the time, or maybe just that she understands things, and maybe you could help support her in being more successful in this class. And that student looked at me like I was crazy, okay? But that wasn't at Rutgers where I am now, but one of the things that I learned from that was that a lot of my students at that time were looking for how to be the best, but not looking for how that they could work together. And what I love about all the interviews I've done with students at HBCUs, and I've interviewed students and alumni in 25 years. I've interviewed nearly 6,000 HBCU students or alumni. And over and over and over, they told me how important it was to make sure that their peers were coming along with them. You know, incredibly important. You're getting a lot of messages up here, whoever's got this up here. Okay, so another thing that, yeah, you're getting a lot of them. I don't know what's going on. So they take responsibility for students. It's okay, it's really fine. They take responsibility for student success. So here's what we do in most cases. So-and-so isn't doing well in class. There must be something wrong with them. They're not studying, they're not trying hard enough, they don't have the right background. many HBCUs will say, what can we do better, right? They're taking responsibility for student success. I love that they provide holistic advising. This has become very trendy and cool now, but HBCUs have been doing it forever. Wraparound services, care about the whole person. My friend over here knows, don't you? Care about the whole person. Over the years, I have, in all these interviews I've done, I've never said the word family when doing the interview, but every single interview, somebody says, it's a family. They take care of me. People called me to get me out of bed when I didn't come to class. People, when I didn't have enough money for my books, a professor paid for it. When someone died in my family, people showed up at the funeral. I mean, like all the time, nonstop talk of that. And then that leads me to, a lot of engagement with the family and community. We don't always do that. What happens is, oftentimes, it might be a little bit different here, okay, because it's very family-oriented in this city, okay? But there were a lot of families on the plane when I was on the plane. There were a lot of families, a lot of them. So they were big families, and there were a lot of people. So anyway, I felt like I was on a blessed plane. That's how I felt. So one of the things that happens, though, at a lot of majority institutions is that we divorce the student from their life. We forget that they're going through all kinds of things. We forget that they have family. We forget that they can be responsible for all kinds of things. What I love about HBCUs is they work to not forget that. Really important. All right, so, oh my gosh, now I think this thing is taking every word I'm saying and translating it, just as an FYI. I've never had this happen before. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why partnerships with HBCUs are valuable to you. And on my next slide, I'm going to talk about why they're valuable to HBCUs, okay? Because it can't be one way here. So some of the things that are really important in terms of for you as an institution is that you are going to have much greater innovation and be able to, collaboratively do much better research if you're bringing in students from HBCUs, if you're partnering with HBCU faculty, if you're working on projects with folks from HBCUs. Here's why. Anytime we bring people into our circle who have different ideas and different experiences, we benefit immensely. Do you all know that? We just benefit immensely. It's a beautiful thing. It's why my daughter went to public schools, because that's an incredibly important thing. We have access to a much more diverse talent pool, and not just racially. That's really important. It's incredibly important. But also, think about the Black diaspora. People coming from all over the place. Black people are everywhere with different languages and skills and experiences. You're also going to have diversity in terms of socioeconomic status, religion, sexuality, right? All of these things are going to come, and you're going to be able to see that there's incredible diversity among Black people, and that helps us not to stereotype people. Okay, I think that HBCU folks can teach majority institutions about how to better engage the community. There is we talk so much about things like anchor institutions. You ever hear that? Anchor institutions means you're an institution that is down with the community, right? You're doing all these things in the community. HBCUs are the original anchor institutions, okay? This is where Black people had their daycare, the civil rights movement, voting, community meetings. They were doing all of these kinds of things. And then you also have things like community engagement. The whole community engagement movement has been it's seen as like a white institution movement. But HBCUs, I wrote a whole article about this one time because I was mad, because I felt like HBCUs were robbed of the movement, right? And so HBCUs have been doing that for so long and have so much to teach us about how to engage with the community in equitable ways. Ways that don't look down on community, but that look for ways to uplift community. I also think it will help you immensely with your cultural competence and understanding. I realize that politically things are a little rough right now, but I don't know where you stand politically, and Rodney, I'll behave, I promise. But I just want to say, Don't back down. Do what's right, okay? Do what's right. You got to do what's right, okay? It's important to do what's right. So that'll give you more cultural richness. I live in New Jersey. I mean, I don't. I live in Philly, but I work in New Jersey. Okay, so just know that you will learn immensely in terms of cultural richness and understanding, and that will help you to understand yourself more, too. It's really, really important. And then I think you should do student and faculty exchanges. You can do, that's not really study abroad, it's study within, and those are great opportunities. The only thing, if you're gonna do that, you gotta remember that you can't invite people to dinner and not let them eat, right? You can't invite people to dinner and keep the same menu. Today's menu was pretty good, but I mean, I know you're looking at me like that. I'm not talking about food. Okay, so I'm not talking about food. What I'm talking about is you might need to make some changes. You know, a while back there were some corporations that invited a whole bunch of HBCU students into their corporations, but they kept them exactly the same, and the students had terrible experience because they were still operating the same way. You sometimes have to make some changes. And when you become more diverse, sometimes it's a little more uncomfortable because the ways that you've been doing things might not work for everybody. So you got to be really open to that. Okay, so now, HBC, I have 2 slides. I'm going to be good. Two slides. How do partnerships benefit HBCUs? This is incredibly important because we do not want one-sided partnerships. There's a long history of one-sided partnerships in the United States with HBCUs, where predominantly white institutions come in, take what they want, leave, HBCU gets nothing. We do not want that. So for HBCUs, I think it's really important that they have access to some of your research opportunities. I think it's great to share infrastructure because HBCUs don't have as many resources, even the ones that are more highly resourced, like a Spelman, they don't have the same amount of resources, financial resources. They got tons of human resources, but financial resources, and so helping with infrastructure can be a really good thing to do. For example, if you're applying for a big federal grant, managing that huge infrastructure of the grant can be really tough, so a majority institution can really help with something like that. That doesn't mean you take all the money. So don't approach HBCUs with, hey, we got $10,000 for you out of this $6 million grant. You want to approach them, you know, in an equitable way. I think that having more research opportunities for advanced study, especially for the small liberal arts HBCUs, this is a great opportunity, especially if they're paid. Recently, I was part of a evaluation team that was looking at a partnership, the evaluation team. I was coming from the outside. And what we found out is that people were brought into a majority institution, a wealthy one, from HBCUs, but they weren't given any funding. So you had students who were, you know, having trouble finding housing, all kinds of things like that. If you're gonna bring people in, you gotta take care of them, like Rodney has been doing, which has been really lovely. I think that there are opportunities for curriculum enhancement, right? So what about like co-teaching classes? And I mean, that's possible to do that, and it can enhance the HBCU curriculum. It will also enhance the curriculum here. There'll be a lot of learning. And again, I put faculty and student exchange programs on here because that is a great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity too if the majority institution can kind of take on some of the cost of that. A lot of HBCU faculty, depending on where they are, they don't get a lot of travel funds. They don't get to go to some of the professional conferences that others get to go to. So it's a great opportunity to be able to do those research exchanges or teaching exchanges. All right, so this is gonna be my last slide before questions. And one of the things I see happen over and over, I think you're doing a little bit better here from what I've been hearing, but I see partnerships start and then just fizzle out. So I want to talk to you. I do a whole talk just on partnerships, but because this is at lunch, I didn't want to talk too long. So one of the things that happens is people don't make their expectations clear. And what I would say is you should have like a memo of understanding or an agreement that you both put together. Not one puts it together. Right? You do not want the majority institution to put the agreement together and go to the HBCU and say, sign this. You want to co-construct an agreement that helps everyone involved. I would make sure that you have people of color on the team here. Not all, but people of color. If you can have some HBCU grads, I would do that. I think that that's a more equitable way of fostering those partnerships. And if you're in an area where you don't have a lot of people of color or you don't have any HBCU grads, reach out to somebody who might be. And if you're giving them extra work, you should find a way to compensate them. We should not be asking people of color to do a lot of things for free. We do that over and over. We do that to women as well, especially women of color, more than anybody. So every time you ask a woman of color to do something, think about a way to compensate her. That's incredibly important. Okay, so you also have to really think about the cultural differences that might happen. Okay, so you got to talk through those. There might be things where you're going to disagree. You don't value the same things. You might value the same things, but you don't know, so you got to have those conversations. I think it's a great idea to develop sort of a little protocol. There are lots of these online, and I actually have some. If you want me, I'm happy to send them to you, where you think about what do we do if there's a conflict? Do you have, okay, any of you in here, like married, long-time relationship? Okay, so that's not a lot, but anyway, they are right, marriage is falling. No, so one of the things you gotta do when you first get together, right, either if you're gonna get married or maybe it's a commitment, whatever it is, you gotta talk about how you're gonna solve the conflicts, right? Because what happens if you don't? What happens? I'm not talking to you, or what, right? Or you give people the silent treatment. You probably still do it, but you do all these things. But if you have an agreement where you talk through, if we disagree, we commit to do this, you're in a much better situation. Most of us don't do that, okay? The only thing my mom told me when I was a young girl is never go to bed angry. Not sure what that means, but she just told me not to do that. So have a conflict resolution document where you say, if we have a conflict, we agree, get together and talk about it. Don't, maybe we agree to talk about it on Zoom or in person, not on email. Because you know what happens when you spit anger on email, right? You lose friends. So we don't want to do that. Develop a protocol, really, really good idea. And then you want to make sure that the leadership of both organizations is involved. So for example, if the HBCU leader happens to be a president, your president needs to be involved. If it's, or provost to provost or dean to dean, you need to pay people the respect that they're paying you. You also want to make sure that this doesn't get kind of thrown to the side. That it's a front and center relationship. And then I always tell people that if challenges come up in the partnership, view those as opportunities. Now, I know that sounds really kind of sappy, but I'm going to tell you something. So, when COVID hit, my dean, who is an amazing woman, if you don't know her, her name is Wanda Blanchette. She's a Delta. Any Deltas? Okay, I knew, I just knew. Okay, she's amazing. I want you all to know that my dean, my provost, and my chancellor are all Deltas. Okay, so anyway, I am so proud. Oh my God. Okay, wait. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, I knew you were wonderful. I mean, do you see this outfit over here? I just can't even believe it. I can't even believe it. I don't even know what to say. Okay, I got to get myself back here. Okay, so my dean, her name is Wanda Blanchette, and she's so funny. She's like, people tell me you say good things about me everywhere, and I'm like, right, because that's what real people do. They don't just say it to your face, they say it when you're not around. So anyway, when COVID hit, she said to me, never waste a crisis. And at first I was like, huh? And then that is the best advice. And some of y'all are in a crisis right now. Never, ever waste a crisis. A crisis is an opportunity, or a conflict, or a challenge is an opportunity to rethink things, rethink yourself, come up with something better, try something new, right? That's what happens. I'm not saying that bad things don't happen in crises. They do. They definitely happened through my, extended life. But don't waste that. Try to get whatever you can. Learn as much as you can out of crisis. So if you do have a challenge, if a partnership falls apart, think about what you could have done better. And there's nothing wrong with apologizing if you don't get it right. Yesterday, I don't, it's so silly what I did, but I messed up something by like 15 minutes. And, I'm like, I really try to be super organized. And I put it on my calendar for 15 minutes longer than it should have been. And basically, there was a speaker who thought she had a little bit more time, and she didn't, right? So I had to apologize because I had to catch the flight here. So I had to apologize, and I said, this is on me. This is my fault. I didn't notice it, and I just want to apologize to you, and if there's anything I can do to make it up, I'd be happy to shorten the amount of time for questions so that you can do the work that you set out to do, right? If you screw up, apologize for it, and that's kind of how I would approach these things. You're gonna mess up. That's gonna happen in any partnership, any marriage, any relationship. You're gonna mess up. So I would have those discussions early on. I think that's one of the issues that happens with these partnerships is they lose momentum. There's nobody there. You're lucky because you have somebody who's like watching over them, but they lose momentum, and then the relationship sort of just fades away. It's not really a ghosting, but it kind of feels a little bit like that. So I don't really like ghosting. I think we should take ownership for our decisions in life, and we should tell people when it's time for them to go. I just do. I do. I think that's important. It's because I'm 56 that I think that we're like that. But anyway, so that would be my advice. I'm going to stop there. I put a little question slide here. And by the way, Chloe Epstein is my daughter. She's an artist. And she did all the things for this. So, product of Philadelphia Public Schools, by the way. 76% African American in a majority African American city, and that was one of the best things I ever did was have her go to public school. It'll change your life, and I think that's incredible. I went to public school too. So, all right, what do we got? What kind of questions? Oh my God, it's Mary Ann and Mary Beth. It's gonna be great.
I called Marybeth Mary Ann a couple of times from the airport, but
that's okay. Just don't call me Mary Lou.
Right. So we're going to take this opportunity, Mary Ann Villarreal, our Vice President.
What do you want?
You all can stand.
I think we stand because we're both short.
Okay,
I mean, we'll get lost behind this first
How
table.
tall are you?
I'm 5'1"3/4".
I think you're lying. You got high hair though, but I'm 5'2". Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon, my friends. Good afternoon. You didn't know you were in so much fun. I do have to say, the Deltas that I work with, who I see on a daily, brilliant. I have an assistant vice president who's AKA, and if I didn't say that, I'd be in trouble. So there, I get to keep my job today. Yes.
I love the AKAs too.
Yeah.
I think they're great.
So we're going to open up to questions, and we'll come around. But I want to pose a few questions up here before we get started. I want to say thank you to everybody, and I want everybody to look at the name and the university, the college that folks went to on your table. Make sure you know who our colleagues are on this campus, and the talent that has been brought to Utah. So I'm going to, thank you, Rodney and Pamela gave me 10 prepared questions, but your presentation changed a little bit for me.
Okay.
Right? And that is, we talk a lot about pipelines and pathways. You bring up reciprocity, so I'm going to bring in a thought, the reciprocity. How do PWIs change the language of thinking about that the path is traveled, and not just with faculty-student engagement, right? But how the path is traveled from them to us. And what is the reciprocity, right? The growing opportunities that you're seeing out there. We've had Rodney now with us for, 2 years? Stanford just created a position. I think Brown created a
Yale.
position. Yale created a position after us.
Yeah.
But in that there is what is the responsibility we have to ensure that it is a reciprocity. It is a national model of we change who we are in this moment.
Okay, so this is a really good question. One of the things that just baffles me is that, and I'm not saying this about here because it makes a little bit more sense that coming to HBCUs would be a little bit further along at this part of the country, but where all those other people are getting on the bandwagon, HBCUs have been right there the entire time. I mean, their faculty are filled with people who went to HBCUs for undergrad, and they have completely ignored HBCUs for a long, long time. And I say that as someone who has had people say to me, what's an HBCU? Or, you know, I've also had people say to me, are you sure when I was younger, you sure you want to do that? You know, you'll be, quote, ghettoized, you'll never have a career. I had people say that to me, and I was just like, okay, I need a new person in my life. Cannot have that person no more. Okay, so it's baffling to me that people are just kind of coming onto this, just realizing the benefits of HBCUs and tribal colleges and Hispanic serving institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the thing. What we have to do is stop ourselves from thinking that I'm going to talk about HBCUs in particular. HBCUs are inferior institutions. People think they are inferior institutions. Now, you can say, no, I don't, but I'm telling you people do, and I'm going to tell you something. People do this to me. I'll come and give a talk, and somebody inevitably will go like this. Hey, I really enjoyed your talk, but I mean, let's get real. Okay? And by the way, that person's not black who just said that to me. They typically are someone's like, you know, come on. Let's be real. Let's be honest. And I'll be like, I'm being real. So one of the things that I know is I'm talking to this other person over here, right? You have absolutely no evidence for saying that. You have no evidence. I always ask people, give me your evidence for telling me that HBCUs are inferior institutions. Show me the evidence. I'd like to know, right? I want to know how you know that. And they can't give me the evidence. They might tell me the graduation rates are a little lower, and then I'll say, well, 71% of the students are Pell Grant eligible, and we know that if you're from a low-income family, you're less likely to be able to graduate because income and graduation rates correlate. So give me something else, right? Give me something else. Because if institutions took 71% Pell Grant eligible students, they would have low graduation rates too. And how do you explain a place like Spelman that has 56% Pell Grant eligible students and graduates 86% of its students? That's one of the highest graduation rates in the country. So what are other people not doing right? Right? So that, you know, like, I'm sorry, it's true. Everybody in the country should be going to Spelman and looking at what Spelman does. They should. There's not a place in the country you shouldn't be going. So one of the things I would say is that that's number one. Stop looking at HBCUs as if they are inferior. And you know why we do that? Because we look at black people as inferior. And thus we look at black institutions as inferior. That's just a fact. I'm so sorry, Rodney, if I'm getting in trouble right now. But that is the truth, okay? That is the truth. I watch people do it all the time. I see them from afar. They won't do it in front of me anymore. But I see them from afar. So that's number one. Number two is realize that we need to learn. All of us need to learn, and we can learn things from other cultures. We can learn so much. And your life will be so much happier. It really will. You'll feel so much happier. You will be, I'm talking to white people right now, you will be less angry about what you think you're missing out on once you decide that you are going to engage with other people. You'll realize that your life is really good and that you can learn from other people. So that's one thing. That's another thing. You can start all these partnerships by saying this is a two-way street. But I will tell you the majority of these partnerships we're going to see, they're going to be one way. They're going to be one way. We're going to help the people at HBCUs to have experiences, right? I'm serious. Please don't hurt me. No, okay.
Since we're having a little bit of fun, Rodney's saying, I'm not getting fired, Marianne's getting fired. Oh, it's already too late. So let me let me
I
say
love you, Mary.
let me add here. So yes, we love public schools, but I'm going to tell you, in the house today we have Roland Hall, independent school, and we have Judge, who's Catholic.
Very nice, very nice, very
right.
nice. I went to
And-
Catholic school for a little bit.
Yeah. And I say that our K through 12 folks, right, are here with us today, and I know some of our K through 12 folks also are graduate of HBCUs. But as we think about the next, right, that next, in what ways are you seeing institutions like ours? You know, this has been an incredible community. We see an HBCU Alum Alliance, right? What is then the next wave in which we have, again, our responsibility not to extend out, but to open up around the ways in which we use a model that we're growing with our HBCUs into that K through 12 process? Have you seen anything like that?
Okay.
Or am I just giving Rodney more work right now?
No, so you're talking about, I'm not sure exactly what.
I guess I'm talking about, we have our friends
Yeah.
here, so how do we both think about our K through 12 students, but our K through 12, and I'm gonna, because my next question will be about leadership,
Yeah.
just to give you a
Yeah.
heads up.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Right,
here.
So,
Okay.
but how have you seen that done? What are some opportunities, perhaps,
Okay.
that are not being utilized right now?
Okay, I got a number of answers to this. Okay, I'm going to start with the first one. I think, Rodney, that this institution should do everything it can with you and the voices of anybody who has gone to an HBCU who is here to make this a model for the nation. Okay? So, the fact that you're spending an entire day thinking about HBCUs, I also have, there's some books about tribal colleges, and I notice there's some interest there as well, and I think there is some interest in Hispanic serving institutions as well. So make yourself a model for the nation, but don't have, it can't look like we're so great, okay? It needs to be, we went to HBCUs, we care about HBCUs, and now we're in this environment, and we are going to shift things. Now, I don't know how easy that is to do right now, but I don't think it should be that hard, because historically black colleges and universities, that's not the same thing as what is happening here, right? These are federally designated institutions. So I would say that's one thing that can help overall. Now, with regard to the K through 12 setting, one thing I will say is that there is an issue, and this is research-based, that K through 12 schools, regardless of being public or private, let's say high schools, and even if you're in the 7th and 8th grade area, do not recommend HBCUs to their students. In fact, many guidance counselors will downplay them and insult them and tell students not to go to them. Stop doing that, okay? Just stop doing that if you're doing it. Have some HBCU alums come in and talk about it. You seem to have a bunch here who could go to the schools, the public and private schools, and talk about it. I think that's incredibly important. Talk about your own experiences. One of the wonderful things now is that there are a lot of books about HBCUs for children and young adults. You can just go on Amazon. There are a bunch of them. Someone just sent me one to review the other day. Lots of resources like that. In my brand new book with my colleague Lamont Esters, it's called HBCU, it's sitting in the middle of that table. We have so many alumni voices and stories in that book where we interviewed over 60 people. Share their stories. So that if you share stories, people will become more interested in going to HBCUs. Now I realize you might be wanting them to come here, but they could always come here for graduate school, right? Not that there aren't HBCU graduate schools, but you could set up a pathway that encourages people to go to HBCUs, come here for graduate school, like what do you call those, a 5-year or a 2+2 or something, whatever you do. You can do those kinds of things, and it will help everybody involved. So.
My last question, and then I'm going to open it up to folks. And this has to do with leadership. And I know Marybeth through MSI leadership development, minority serving institutions, when I was at Cal State Fullerton. I had the opportunity to go through that program. So one of the things that we talk about here around our leadership development, particularly with our new Leadership Academy, is that it is when we are thinking about leadership growth and development for individuals who are serving in a Hispanic serving and a PZ, which is Asian American Native Student Institution, or a tribal, a TCU, HBCU, and you had all of us, right? All of us represented in a room. Kevin Brown, Kevin from your institution, Mr. Bowles, was in my cohort.
Oh, Kevin James.
Oh,
yeah.
Kevin James, sorry. And Kevin, but what you taught us is that we had to take off, right, the frame of our home, of what we thought we should be like, which was like a PWI, and think very differently about how we serve students, how we developed as leaders. What do you see as those current continuing opportunities for people who are thinking about leading in institutions that are majority, and not that I want anybody to go, but that, right, there are majority non-PWIs?
Okay, so like for
So,
leaders of
right.
MSIs?
Yeah,
or- okay.
MSIs, HBCUs,
Okay.
TCUs.
So, I don't know how many of you know who Ruth Simmons is. Do you know who Ruth Simmons is? You should know.
I was
You
just
should-
gonna say that.
You should look up Ruth Simmons. She was the president of Brown University, but she came out of retirement to be the president of Prairie View A&M University, which I heard somebody talking about earlier. And she's a phenomenal, phenomenal leader. She has a new biography. It's an autobiography out right now. A phenomenal leader. And one of the things I heard her say was that one of the things that HBCUs need to do is not try to be like predominantly white institutions. They need to be HBCUs. They need to lean into what is beautiful about being an HBCU, the family culture, the success-oriented culture. One of the most beautiful things is that students have told me over the years, people believed in me more than I believed in myself. That is beautiful, right? And we all need that. I don't know about you, but when I was 18 years old, I didn't even know who I was, and thank God, somebody was looking out for me. There's things like the really leaning into the African American diaspora and learning about history and culture and literature and poetry and everything else you can learn. And not that you're not learning all these, other things, but that you're leaning in and leading in a way that makes sense for the people who you're leading. Like Michael Sorrell, who's the president of Paul Quinn College, a black college in Dallas, Texas, an AME college. He says you can't lead people you don't love. And he says you got to lead with love. And that is an HBCU thing. That's an HBCU thing. And you don't hear a lot of majority institution folks saying that. They probably would be afraid. But leading with love, I think, lean into it, right? Lean into activism, lean into love, lean into family, lean into all of that. That's what I would tell people. And then I would also say, don't ever lose sight of the community that you represent. Those are the things that I would emphasize. That's why I run a center that runs a program that Mary Ann was part of that's called MSI Aspiring Leaders, and that's why we put all of these leaders together. Not leaders of majority institutions, leaders of MSIs who can talk to each other about the common issues that they face, and a lot of those common issues are being under attack all the time as an institution. Because believe me, there are plenty of people who do not think that black people or other people of color deserve to be educated. You do know that. Like, education is a political act, and there are people who don't believe that that's important, and that people of color don't deserve opportunities, don't deserve access. That's what people are fighting about right now. They're worried that people of color are going to get too many opportunities. And that's what people are fighting about right now. You've got to lean into that, and as a person who's leading an institution like that, and be aware that that's always going to be an issue. That it's always going to be an issue It might even continue to be an issue when the country is beyond 50% people of color, because as we know, the majority of people who will own the assets in the country are still going to be white, okay? So, these are all issues that you got to think about, that sometimes if you're a leader of a majority institution, you're not thinking about them that much. You should be. But
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to encourage us all to think about how we lead inside of PWI that's very different than what we bring with us, right? That we bring with us from non-PWI institutions and how we start to change the culture. My mentor did support me through that, and then I came here and she said, wait, you're not going to MSI. What happened? So there we are. It's possible to take what you know and grow it somewhere else. We're going to take questions from the audience right now. We're about 10, 11, 12 minutes out here, so if there are any questions or comments, thoughts, welcome those too. So.
Thank you.
So I just have, this is kind of an interesting thing. You were saying like that the HBCUs were Pell Grant eligible or whatever. So.
Oh, I was saying that 71% of
Yeah.
their student body is Pell Grant eligible, which
Yeah.
means they're the lowest income in the nation.
Right. So I guess my question is on this because I have nieces and nephews who are approaching that, and they're in rural areas. And so I'm wondering if that's just like if they're accepting or if this is just misguided counseling or something like that. But like I had one of my nieces really wanted to go to Spelman. That's like, she did, and I said, you do know that's an HBCU? And she was like, a what? She just heard that it was a great place to go get education. But she said, my counselor said I couldn't afford it because it's just too up there for me. So I have to go to because I'm Pell eligible, and we're too poor. And she said that a lot of her friends, when they're saying that they're wanting to go to, a lot of them are wanting to go to some HBCUs, they're being told that they're too expensive for them and that they can't go. So that was interesting when you said that. And so I was wondering, is that just a local thing, because that's clear back east, we're out west, and that they're accepting them? Or is that like a misguided counseling saying, oh, you can't afford this, not just the grades, they're straight A students, but not just the grades, but like, that's too high. You need to think of a community college, or you need to think of a state college. You can't even aspire to get into those schools.
Okay, so there are a lot of things there, so I'll kind of unpack them, okay? So first of all, there have been white women who have attended Spelman, and also women of other racial or ethnic backgrounds. The norm would be, the majority would be black women, okay? Because that is really looked upon as like the quintessential institution, right, for black women, mainly because it's just produced so much success in terms of black women in America and beyond. But aside from that, just a little bit about like tuition and how that kind of plays out. So black colleges, the tuition overall at black colleges is 50% less than, it's 50% of predominantly white institutions. Now, you might say, okay, how does that work, right? Now, the tuition is less, but one of the issues is because of systemic racism from decades upon decades, HBCUs have lower endowments, they have less money to use for institutional aid or scholarships for students. So what happens is, if you go to let's say, and Spelman's a private college, okay? So private colleges are always typically going to the sticker price is going to look like it's more than a public college. It's not always. It depends on how much institutional aid they have to offset. So as an example, I'm just going to take a women's college. I'm going to take Wellesley, which is a women's college in the Northeast, which has not had to deal with systemic racism, and thus has an enormous endowment. Okay, it's an enormous endowment, and they can provide a lot of institutional aid. Their tuition looks high, but if you go there and you're from a low-income family, more than likely you're probably not going to have to pay very much at all, because they can offset it. You've got your Pell Grant, you're probably going to get some institutional grants and scholarships. It's a little bit more difficult for private HBCUs because they don't have those large endowments that they can draw that, you're allowed to draw 5% off the endowment, that they can draw off of to provide institutional aid. So from time to time, it can be more expensive to attend some HBCUs because they don't have the institutional aid. I will say though that, so I grew up, I was a Pell Grant eligible student. My parents made about $7,000, give or take, when I was a kid, between each other. My mom was a cleaning lady. My father worked in a lumber yard. And so I also, immediately when a teacher said, you should go to college, you're smart, I said, well, first of all, I said, I'm poor, I'm not smart, right out of my mouth, right? And I also said, I'm poor, I can't go to college. Now, I went to a college that would be a predominantly white institution, but a small Catholic liberal arts college that had a hefty tuition. It's pushing probably around what Spelman cost. Now, I got Pell Grant. I got another federal grant. I think it was an SOEG grant. I did take out student loans, okay? I want you to know I paid them off in 2008, and I don't feel bad when people get their loans forgiven. I feel happy for them, okay? Because why would I ever want to hate people for having their loans forgiven? This is crazy. It was like, you know, terrible. Okay, so I had student loans, and I was able to go to college. Now, my parents couldn't pay the parental contributions, so I worked like 4 jobs during the summer. I never want to do that again, standing on cement all day or whatever. I worked those 4 jobs, and then I made enough money to pay my contribution. So that's kind of how higher education is a little whack in that way, that we have the sticker price, and then we have what people actually pay. So a public HBCU, if you're in state, you're not going to pay that much. I mean, it's going to be fairly low. Any private institution that you go to, unless they have a large endowment, you're going to pay more. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. And if you're out of state and you go to a public, you're going to pay more. They love out-of-state students because they pay more, right? So it really has more to do with our higher education system than anything else. But I did want to tell you that HBCUs have always been open to anyone, and there are lots and lots of different people that attend HBCUs. Yep. Okay. Oh my gosh. Let's see. I'm going over here, Morris Brown.
Information that you provide about going to HBCUs and the financing on it. The information in Utah is, remember our environment? Our environment in Utah encourages students to go to big schools and have enough money. They really don't encourage them to go to Salt Lake Community College, right? So keep that in mind. So that was part of what you were getting from your counseling. The counselors and the people in our state that are guiding our kids don't have the information to help your kid make that decision or give you the right advice.
I am a college counselor in the state, and I wanted to comment on that as well.
Yeah.
So I am a college counselor at Judge Memorial Catholic School here, and I am grateful to be at a school that prioritizes the college search application process. We have dedicated counselors to that, but not the public schools, unfortunately, don't always, and they rely on the college access advisors. And even as a pretty well-resourced school, we rely on higher institution admissions personnel to come talk to our students, bring materials, tell them about things. We can only know so much about so many schools. And HBCUs recruit in a very different way. They don't come all the way out to Utah to meet with every high school like a lot of other colleges do. They don't go to every college fair that the Association of College Counseling puts on. And so I do have a population of students that have interests at HBCUs and will in the next coming years. And so I have had to employ a very intentional HBCU college-going culture because those people are not coming to us, especially in a state like Utah, unfortunately. This is not where their resources lend them. And so when you mentioned, like, was it poor counseling? It really could have been. It could be less informed counseling where that counselor is not prioritizing that recruitment. That might be because their students, they don't have the population of students that are maybe interested in going there. But I think it does require these partnerships, and that's what I was thinking this whole time, is that all of these alum in the room are partners here at the University of Utah, like, that your alma maters are not coming here to talk to my students, but you are here, and it's a great opportunity to get involved and tell those stories that, you know, your alma maters don't have the resources to come out and tell. As well as one thing I hear from my students that are looking at HBCUs is that they're so far away. They always ask, why isn't there one in Utah? Or like, why isn't there one out here? And, you know, that's a whole nother conversation, but they are further away for my students.
They need a history class, just FYI.
Yeah, but they're further away, and they don't, even for the student that's the perfect fit for them, you know, flying there, relocating, that might be a huge barrier. And so having partnerships here at their local university that still allow them to have partnerships with HBCUs and get involved is so, so important for the student that can't go out there. So yeah, I would really, really encourage everyone to get involved in the local community, whether that's at public school or private school. I'm not originally from Utah, and I used to work at the University of Utah in admissions. And when I had the Salt Lake City School District, as well as our private schools, it was incredibly eye-opening at the diversity in this county. And so it was just like, there's so many people that I think would be incredible at an HBCU, but just getting that school in front of them and in their mind and introducing that culture to them is really difficult. So.
Yeah, another thing I was going to say is that there are a number of HBCUs that are starting satellite campuses in the state of California. You could get them to start a satellite campus here. I know that there's one, I can't say who they are, but I know that they were asked by the city of San Francisco to do a satellite campus, and you're so funny. Don't tell all your secrets. Anyway, so that, you know, that's something that could easily be done. It might, if people are worried about going too far away. I think that, you know, most people go to college less than 100 miles from where they grew up. That's just a fact. And so that might be something that could be done, be kind of interesting. It would also really help HBCUs to grow their enrollment and their reach, which would be good. Anything else? Ooh, look at that, all right. What do we got?
Hello, thank you for being here. I use your research around faculty diversity and pipeline research, so I have many questions about that. But my question now is to help me resolve my angst around the nomenclature referencing HBCUs versus PWIs, especially since we're in a state that has pretty much condemned the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're seeing the significance of nomenclature. So why aren't we aligning references to institutions of higher education? HBCUs wouldn't have existed if there had not been historically white institutions. So why are we continuing to soften the history around referencing PWIs?
Do you mean by using PWI instead of HWI?
Yes.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. You know, as a historian, when I first started out, I would use HWI all the time. And interestingly, it was a group of African American scholars who said, "Oh, we don't want to use that because we want them to be predominantly white now, so that it's evident that there are other people there." But now there's a movement to use HWI. Now again, I am not someone who's going to spend my life getting stuck on specific words because I have a lot of other things to do. But I will say that I am constantly reminding people that majority institutions are historically white institutions. I think if you want to bring back HWI, then just use it. Just refuse to use PWI and just use it. I mean, I usually say majority institution. I'll just refer to it that way. Occasionally, if I'm feeling sassy, I'll say white schools, but you know, but it just depends. But yeah, it's up to you. I mean, it depends. You know, depending on where you live in the country, there are different words that people use, right? I remember when I lived in Texas, people kept referring to me as Anglo, and I was like, there isn't any Anglo in me. I don't know what that's about, right? And I remember when I lived there, people didn't like the word Latino. They liked Hispanic, right? So it all depends on kind of where you live and who you are and what kind of words you want to use. But I would use the words that make you feel empowered, that make sense to you. For me, if I'm doing historical work, I'm going to use historically white institution. But if I'm talking to a group that uses PWI, I might just use because they don't know what I'm talking about if I say HWI, or I might just say majority institutions. I mean, I sort of change the language all around. That's the way that I would deal with that. I mean, you know, there's also a lot of kind of false information about where words come from, right? Like sometimes I'll hear people talk about the origin of a certain word. I'm like, okay, that's not the origin of that at all. That's not the history of that. That's not how that came about. Please read a book. You know what I mean? So I'll have to say to people, please read a book. That's why I really need you to work on the history so that people know why there aren't HBCUs here. So yeah, I would do what feels comfortable for you. And like I said, if you look in all my historical writing, it's always going to say historically white institution. It also has to do with, like, the federal government now uses predominantly white institution, right? They also use minority serving institution as a federal designation. I mean, I run a center for minority serving institutions, but I can't change it to something else until the federal government changes it. There are people who've changed it to broad access, but I think that's a way to wipe out the racial issue involved, and I don't like that, so I use the word that empowers what I want to do, right? So I'll say MSI, but I always differentiate between all the different institutions because they're so different. They're very, very different. So use what works for you, but I agree with you. They are historically white, and they systematically segregated against the majority of people of color in the country. So, good question. I had one of my PhD students write a whole essay about that, by the way, so.
Go ahead.
Do we have time for one more? Hi, Stacia McFadden, proud alum of Elizabeth City State
Ooh,
University.
yes, I've been there.
Part of the
Yep.
UNC system in North Carolina. I loved how you were talking about there being reciprocity in parts of, like, what's the benefit. Not just for the students of color who might choose a HBCU engaging with a HWI. So I've seen such programs like Spelman. I know a sorority sister who did Spelman for 3 years and then was able to go to, like, Georgia Tech.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
very
Xavier
common.
has partnerships similarly with engineering. I'm trying to understand, like, what is the benefit? Of course, we know what the benefit is for that student if they're a person of color who gets that cultural experience out of HBCU and then goes to the HWI and they're helping to diversify and so forth. But when we talk about resources, is there some kind of financial help that helps that HBCU that's often less resourced than those HWIs? Like, what is the reciprocity there on a bigger level?
So for those partnered arrangements, is that what you mean? Yeah. I mean, they're all different, right, depending on what people have worked out. My assumption is that Spelman is going to be able to recruit more students who are, because they have that program with Georgia Tech. I mean, Spelman turns away students, but they might be looking for a student with a specific kind of background, especially because Georgia Tech is, like, so good in that, you know, like in engineering, right, if we were to bring that up. And then you think about Spelman's role in producing future Black women engineers. That program has helped them immensely to do that. So it's helping Spelman's reputation. It's giving them more resources. It's helping Georgia Tech immensely because, let me tell you, they wouldn't have that much diversity. In terms of the student population, it's a lot better than it used to. And by the way, among the AAU institutions, which you guys are one, right? Are you one? Yeah. The American Association of Universities, which are the most prestigious research institutions in the country, Georgia Tech has the most diverse faculty, which is very interesting, right? and I think Spelman is one of the reasons why that probably had to happen. I'm betting that people at Spelman demanded more diversity in that. I don't know that for sure, but I know that it wasn't always like that. So I think that Georgia Tech is definitely benefiting. I don't know the specifics. They're having to share tuition, so that could be a bit of a loss for Spelman, but it could also be a gain if they're getting students they wouldn't otherwise get, who might go to Georgia Tech only, right? Because keep in mind, Spelman is very good in STEM, but they probably don't have as many, I know they don't because I've done research related to Spelman STEM, they don't have the same number of researchers or access, I'm sorry, I'm trying to see you over here, or access to, I'm so sorry, or access to, let's say, huge grants that Georgia Tech gets. Spelman gets pretty good grants, but Georgia Tech has a huge infrastructure for that. And most of the really high technical or technology STEM schools get these enormous grants. So I'm assuming that their researchers are going to be a part of that, because I know when I was at Spelman doing some work in STEM, that there were lots of Georgia Tech people there kind of working together on grants and all kinds of things like that. So I'm assuming that that's happening, but I don't know. And then you see that happening other places as well. It depends on what they worked out. In some cases, the HBCU is not benefiting, okay? So they might get a little something, but not full benefit. Now, I will tell you one thing that is really interesting, and this is a leadership issue, is that I have heard more and more HBCU leaders say this: don't come to me feeling sorry for me, wanting to toss me a little bit of money. You come here if you want to invest in us, and we'll decide whether or not we want to work with you. That is, changing this whole narrative of HBCUs saying, we're not just going to work with anyone. We want to see what your track record is. We want to see what you have to offer, how this is equitable, how this is collaborative. That has changed. And if you ever want to hear somebody talk really, really in this most amazing way about that, you should listen to Rosalind Artis, who is the president of Benedict College. Yeah, she will talk in depth about how if you come to me, you better come as an investment, not as someone who's trying to we're here to give you a little bit of money and please let me use your name.
Marybeth, let me piggyback on the question that Stacia asked about Georgia Tech. So let me give you some context to that. So I'm a graduate of Clark College at Clark Atlanta University, Marsh Brown, Spelman, and Morehouse, which comprises the Atlanta University Center, which is the largest collection of HBCUs in the world. Also ITC, Morehouse School of Medicine. In the 1970s, because all of those were liberal arts colleges and did not have a technical or engineering school, they partnered with Georgia Tech to do a dual degree program, as you know, because how Georgia Tech benefited is they began to understand that we're producing scientific and technical people without a humanities education.
Right.
So that's where the dual degree came in. So you would get a degree from Marsh Brown in humanities, then you would go get another bachelor's at Georgia Tech in a technical field. That was the impetus of the program. Now, as it has evolved to 2024, that partnership has now expanded to include Tuskegee, North Carolina A&T, University of Rochester, RIT, and those types of institutions. So that was kind of the genesis and the impetus for that Georgia Tech program that is now expanded. Now, to your point, Marybeth, the intent when it first started was for folks at Georgia Tech to also come over to the AU Center and get a humanities experience, because they were just highly technical.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
But did that happen?
No.
No.
That didn't happen, no, it didn't. But to your point, there were some more conversations about collaboration in research and that sort of thing, and now, we're putting together this incubator down there in the AU Center where it's going to be a collection of a bunch of HBCUs. I don't know where we are on that, but it's trying to get off the ground. I think you're familiar with
Right.
the piece I'm talking about.
And
Yeah.
one thing I was going to say, this connects to, Marianne, something you were asking me about. There are all of these new efforts to connect with HBCUs. This is happening at the same time that the federal government is requiring most grants to have minority-serving institutions involved. Do you see? So what we need to be careful of is majority institutions contacting HBCUs with, hey, we're applying for this federal grant, we need an HBCU, can you go along? HBCU should say no. What they should say is, okay, we're applying for this federal grant. We need a historically white institution to go along. Do you want to join with us? Right? And you're seeing more and more HBCUs doing that, who are saying, you know, we'd like to work with you, but we'd like to be the lead on this grant. And for so long, it's been the other way around. But I will say, under the Biden administration, I don't care what your politics are, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I believe that part of this is because Kamala Harris went to an HBCU and is right in his ear all the time, they have done so much for HBCUs in terms of paving the way for HBCUs to get federal contracts, to get federal grants. We know from research that HBCUs have experienced systemic racism in terms of the way they're evaluated in grant processes, that people give them lower scores just because they're at HBCUs. They give researchers lower scores. Because we score people based on the prestige of their institution, and people will say, I've never heard of that institution, and then you get a lower score. That's not based on the quality of the research. It's based on the prestige of the institution, and so we know that now because there have been NSF studies, there have been NIH studies, so we know that exists. And so under the Biden administration, they have been very pointed in saying, we are going to, I don't know if this will last if anything changes, but we are going to set aside money for programs that include minority-serving institutions of all types. So that's been really, really good, but it's also forced historically white institutions to have to say, maybe we need to change our game in the way that we have been reaching out to HBCUs as if, well, you know, you're just lucky to hang out with us. And I feel like for a long time it's been that way.
I'm like, I don't want to be the one to end this conversation, but I'm going to say a couple of things before we give a big round of applause. The first is, today will be the last time you hear from me today. So I want to say thank you all to our community partners. I want to say thank you to the people that I get to work with every day. You make so much of what we do possible. The other thing that I hope that many of you say to yourself, I got to go Google that, or I got to talk to somebody. What does that mean? What does that mean? If you have anything, there should be questions coming out of today that you should learn something. Much history, connection, what is, right? That's the second thing. And the third piece that I want to say today is that this day of collective action is not just a day. So we want, and I hope that what you're doing at your tables are knowing people and that we're continuing our work and growing our work on what it means, right? That not one HBCU is alike. Not one minority serving institution is like. Of the 23 Cal States, 22 of them are HSIs and not one of them are alike. So we have to think about how we work with our institutions that are about us changing our approaches, our integration, our ideas every time. Same thing with our tribal colleges. And I've had the great opportunity of just being on boards with presidents of Dene, of Bennett, and I know that they come to this work, you know, every day recognizing, and I'm going to say this, leading with love. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much,
You're
Marybeth
welcome.
Gasman.
Thank you. Come for a minute. Come here. Thank you. I just want to say something. I don't know if you all know what a special person Marianne is. She is a beautiful, beautiful, special person. I admire her so much. And, I mean, Rodney asked me to come here, but I was so excited about seeing Marianne. So, no, I was really excited about seeing Rodney, too. I think you all should just give her a little round of applause, because she's...
There's a Get Real session later on, right? So we get to get real about HWIs later. Dr. Stevens.
So, Mary Ann, before you leave, on behalf of Mary Ann Villarreal, President Randall, the university faculty, staff, students, and the DARE Collective Action Committee, we want to thank you again and have a little token for you. Yes, yes.
Is it chocolate?
It may be. So, folks, this ends the keynote. So in about 15 minutes, we're going to reassemble for our HBCU panel. And Samantha Eldridge is